Hi, everyone. This is Michael Scott with the American Nursing Exchange Program. I've created a presentation here to prepare you for your upcoming rotation in a Jamaican public health clinic. Over the next few minutes, I'll be addressing some vital information that will help you adapt to the social and professional culture of Jamaica. First, I'll tell you a bit about our program. Then I'll give you a brief overview of your destination, in this case, Jamaica, and we'll talk a bit about the social etiquette, the public healthcare system, and the professional culture on the island. So let's get started. So the goal of our nursing exchange program here at American is to give you the opportunity to put your healthcare expertise to use in an entirely new cultural context while providing essential care to underserved communities in any of several partner nations, in your case, again, Jamaica. This experience should give you the chance to build relationships with colleagues overseas, as well as giving you the satisfaction of knowing that you've helped underserved communities in their time of need. Most of our clinical rotations last for 6 weeks, and the Jamaican program is no exception. A little bit about Jamaica as a country. Jamaica is a Caribbean island. It's the largest of the English-speaking islands in the Greater Antilles. Approximately 90% of the population have African ancestry due to a historical system of plantation slavery on the island. Slavery was abolished in Jamaica in 1807, and the country won independence from Britain in 1962. So this is probably the image of Jamaica you're familiar with from tourism commercials. While its beach resorts are an important part of Jamaica's tourist economy, and while you'll certainly be free to spend your weekends visiting resorts like this one, the communities where you'll actually be practicing will be quite distinct from this idealized image of the country. This picture of a market in Kingston is more indicative of the communities where American places our healthcare professionals. The contrast between this image and the previous one is due to the fact that the majority of Jamaica's national wealth is owned by a small number of white families, while the average Jamaican lives in vibrant, though impoverished, communities like this one. You may be just plain excited about your upcoming experience in Jamaica, or maybe you're asking yourself, how am I going to fit into a culture that's so different from my own? Maybe you're stressing out about navigating the welcome luncheon, where you'll be making small talk with the staff and their families for the first time. Or maybe you're more concerned about the expectations for professional behavior in Jamaica. Over the next few slides, I'll be giving you some tips and pointers about Jamaican culture to help smooth that transition a little bit. First, let's focus on social interactions, like that welcome luncheon I mentioned. One important difference in social interactions between the United States and Jamaica is that Jamaicans put a very large amount of emphasis on immediate verbal acknowledgement when someone approaches. For example, in the United States, it might be considered normal for someone to just approach a group quietly and gradually make their way into the conversation without pausing for a direct acknowledgement. However, in Jamaica, that would be considered rude. When someone approaches the group, you want to directly acknowledge them by name. Another thing to keep in mind is that in Jamaica, the form of greeting that's most common is a handshake, and that's regardless of gender. So women handshake just as much as men do. In Jamaica, people like their personal space just like anywhere, and in general, about an arm's length of distance is normal. So that isn't something that's completely different from what you might expect in the United States. And then another thing to keep in mind is that Jamaicans place a really high level of importance on laughter in social interactions. Jamaicans love to joke and they're very boisterous in general. And whenever you get together with a group of Jamaicans, you'll certainly be hearing a lot of laughter and hopefully participating yourself as well. One thing to keep in mind, both in your interactions with your colleagues and their families and when interacting with the public in the clinic where you're placed, is that gender and family dynamics in Jamaica are very different from what you might expect in the United States. Traditional gender roles still persist on the island, with women being associated with household and family pursuits, while men occupy most of the leadership roles in professional culture. However, this has begun to blur, with women making their way into more of those leadership positions. Families in Jamaica have traditionally been matriarchal, with the mother as the main breadwinner, despite the fact that women get paid less in general in Jamaica than men do. The father, on the other hand, may not be associated with the family at all, or may simply not be considered a reliable source of income or support. As such, the oldest male child can often act as the surrogate father to the other children, and the oldest female child may act as the caregiver while the mother focuses on providing resources for the family. And that's something that you should keep in mind in your practice at the clinic where you're placed, because often it'll be one of the oldest children who makes healthcare decisions for the other family members rather than a parent. On a different topic, in Jamaican culture, one thing that is more common than it is in the United States is catcalling. So that's something that you'll likely witness while you're there on the street, hopefully not in the clinic itself. Another thing to keep in mind is that it isn't normal practice for women to go out by themselves to enjoy nightlife in Jamaica. And the women among you might want to get a group together if you're going to go out to enjoy nightclubs or anything like that. However, it would be considered normal for women to eat by themselves at a restaurant. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the Jamaican healthcare system. Unlike the United States, Jamaica does provide universal coverage to its citizens free of charge. However, the healthcare system is divided into two tiers, the public and the private system. The public system is that which most Jamaicans make use of, whereas the private system is used mainly by the more wealthy Jamaicans who can afford to pay for it. Often, both the public and the private system have the same providers working in them. However, the availability of resources and equipment varies greatly between the two systems. Overall, bed capacity in Jamaica is inadequate for the population, and it's the lower income Jamaicans in the public system who bear the brunt of that issue. Partially as a result of that, folk medicine is still widely used in Jamaica, and the use of folk medicine is inversely correlated with socioeconomic status. So while you're working in the clinic where you're placed, you'll likely be coming into contact with unfamiliar folk remedies like rituals, herbs, recitation of scripture, and it's important while you're working there to respect the traditions of the people who you're helping, because they're not going to be open to your healthcare if you don't respect what they themselves do. And another thing to keep in mind is that it's a widely held belief in Jamaica that illness is seen as a punishment for sin or any kind of negative actions that the person has taken. And so that's something to keep in mind as well, especially in a mental health capacity when you're helping people in the clinic. We already talked a little bit about social interactions in Jamaica, but now let's focus more on professional behavior in the workplace. Since most of you are healthcare professionals, you'll likely be wearing scrubs at work. However, should you attend any meetings outside of work hours, business casual dress is generally accepted. Another thing to keep in mind is that Jamaicans place a lot of emphasis on titles. So know who to call Mr., Mrs., Miss, and just like in the United States, it's important to call doctors by their title. In Jamaica, they have a somewhat different relationship to time than we do in the United States. However, it's still important to arrive punctually for meetings or anything like that. But when you do arrive punctually, be prepared to wait as much as 30 minutes for the meeting to actually begin. Once the meeting begins, however, Jamaicans do tend to get directly to the point and they speak in a direct manner in business situations in general. Gift giving is something that Jamaicans generally would not expect when you first encounter them or when you meet them. However, it is permissible to give gifts at the end of the rotation to members of the staff. So now let's talk a little bit about how not to put your foot in your mouth when you're in Jamaica. There are a few topics that you should steer clear of in professional discussions while you're there. One of those is politics. It's not considered polite in Jamaica to ask anyone about their politics, especially in professional settings, but even in social situations if you're not particularly well acquainted with the person you're speaking to. Another topic that is controversial in Jamaica is homosexuality. Homosexuality is actually still illegal in Jamaica, and there's quite a bit of prejudice surrounding the issue. So that's a topic that it's really best to steer clear of whenever possible. And a final thing to keep in mind is that not every Jamaican is, in fact, Rastafarian. The image some of you might have in your head of a Jamaican person is with the long dreadlocks and whatnot. But in fact, that's a very small subculture on the island, and the majority of Jamaicans are in fact Christian. And that does it for this presentation. I hope you'll find it useful in transitioning into your clinical rotation in Jamaica. Good luck and safe travels.